The knock on the metal roll-up door sounded like a judge's gavel. It was heavy, authoritative, and demanded an answer. It wasn't a friend. Friends don't knock on a detached garage door at 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. Friends text. This was the law. I didn't look up immediately. I was lying on a creeper underneath the chassis of a 1969 Chevelle SS, my hands deep in the guts of the transmission. The air in the garage smelled of 90-weight gear oil, stale coffee, and cold concrete. It was my sanctuary. It was the only place in the world where things made sense. If a bolt is stripped, you tap it. If a gasket leaks, you replace it. Cause and effect. Simple physics. Outside of these four walls, my life was a chaotic mess of legal briefs, screaming matches, and the slow, agonizing death of a 15-year marriage. But in here I was God. The knock came again. Louder. Mr. Vance? Sheriff's Department. Open up. I sighed, the sound echoing in the wheel well. I wiped a streak of grease across my forehead, probably leaving a black smear, and rolled out from under the car. I stood up, my knees cracking. I was 48 years old, but the last year of divorce proceedings had aged me a decade. I hit the button on the wall. The electric motor whirred, and the heavy door began to rise, revealing the bright, blinding sunlight of a California afternoon. As the door cleared head height, two figures came into focus. First, the deputy, a young guy, maybe 30, starched uniform, hand resting casually near his belt, looking uncomfortable. He didn't want to be here. This was a domestic dispute call, the kind cops hate more than anything. And behind him, standing with her arms crossed and a smug, victorious smile plastered across her face, was Veronica. My ex-wife looked like she had just stepped out of a catalog for the aggressive divorcee. She was wearing oversized sunglasses, white linen pants that cost more than my first car, and holding a thick stack of papers against her chest like a shield. "Officer," I said, nodding. I grabbed a shop rag and started wiping the oil from my fingers. "Can I help you?" "Mr. Damon Vance?" the deputy asked. "That's me." "Sir, I'm afraid I have to ask you to vacate the premises." He gestured vaguely at the garage and my tools, at the car I'd spent 5 years restoring. "Ms. Vance has provided me with a copy of the final divorce decree. According to this document, she was awarded exclusive possession of the marital residence at 4400 Ridgewood Lane, effective as of the 1st of the month. That includes all outbuildings." He looked at me with a hint of apology. "She says you're trespassing, sir." I looked at Veronica. Her smile widened. This was her moment. This was the scene she had been rehearsing in her head for weeks. She wanted the humiliation. She wanted to see me kicked off the property in front of the neighbors. She wanted to erase me. "He's been squatting here for 3 days, officer," Veronica said, her voice shrill and performing for an audience that wasn't there. I told him to leave. "He scares me. He's unstable." "Unstable," I repeated, looking at the transmission fluid on my hands. "Right. You need to leave, Damon," she hissed. "Now, or you leave in cuffs. Take your trash with you." She kicked a box of spark plugs near the entrance. The deputy took a step forward. "Sir, please don't make this difficult. If you leave now, we can call it a civil matter. If you refuse, I'll have to cite you for criminal trespass." I finished wiping my hands. I tossed the dirty rag onto the workbench. It landed with a wet thud. "I understand the confusion, deputy," I said, my voice calm, rhythmic, the voice I used in boardrooms when I was about to dismantle a CEO's career. "But you're operating on incomplete information. The decree is signed by a judge," Veronica snapped. "It's final. Get out." "The decree," I said, ignoring her and locking eyes with the deputy, "awards Veronica the deed to the property." "That is correct. She owns the dirt. She owns the house. She owns the pool she can't afford to heat." I walked over to my tool chest. It was a massive, red snap-on cabinet locked tight. On top of it sat a leather briefcase. However, I continued, unclicking the latches of the briefcase. Ownership of real estate is a two-part equation. There is the deed, and there is the note. I pulled out a file. It wasn't the divorce decree. It was a thick, blue-bound document with a bank's logo stamped on the front, overlaid with a new stamp, Omega Servicing, LLC. "Veronica owns the deed," I said, handing the file to the deputy. "But she hasn't made a mortgage payment in 6 months. The bank, First National, declared the loan in default 45 days ago. They packaged the distress note for sale last week." The deputy frowned, flipping through the pages. He saw the assignment of deed of trust. He saw the notarized signatures. "And who is Omega's servicing?" the deputy asked. "I am," I said. Veronica laughed. It was a nervous, brittle sound. "What is he talking about? That's nonsense. I have a lawyer." "I bought the note, deputy," I said, leaning against the fender of my Chevelle. "I bought the debt. I am the lender. And as of 9 a.m. this morning, I filed a notice of default and election to sell with the county recorder." I pointed at Veronica. "She isn't the victim here, officer. She's a delinquent borrower. And under the terms of the mortgage contract she signed, Clause 14, Section B, the lender has the right to inspect the property to ensure it isn't being neglected during foreclosure proceedings." I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "I'm not trespassing," I said. "I'm conducting a collateral inspection. And frankly, the property looks like it's deteriorating." The deputy stopped reading. He looked at Veronica, then back at the papers, then at me. The dynamic in the air shifted instantly. The power didn't come from the badge anymore. It came from the paper. "Is this true, ma'am?" the deputy asked Veronica. "Are you behind on the mortgage?" That's none of his business." Veronica sputtered, her face turning a mottled red. "The judge gave me the house. He has to pay for it. That was the deal." "The deal," I corrected, "was that you refinance within 6 months or sell it. You did neither. You stopped paying. And now, I'm calling the loan due." I turned back to the car. "I'm going to finish fixing my transmission, deputy. Unless you want to arrest the mortgage holder for maintaining his own asset." The deputy handed the papers back to me. He tipped his hat. "Civil matter. Have a nice day, sir." He turned and walked back to his cruiser. Veronica stood there, frozen. The wind had been knocked out of her sails so hard I could almost hear the canvas snapping. She looked at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. "This isn't over," she whispered. "No," I said, sliding back onto the creeper. "It's just starting. Close the door on your way out, Veronica. You're letting the heat in." To understand the look on her face, that mix of confusion and terror, you have to understand the players. You have to understand who we were before the lawyers got involved. My name is Damon Vance. I don't build things. I don't design things. I don't sell products. I buy mistakes. My official title is Distressed Asset Manager. I run a boutique private equity firm that specializes in toxic debt. When a company overextends itself, when a developer runs out of cash halfway through building a skyscraper, when a bank is holding too many bad loans and the regulators start breathing down their necks, they call me. I come in with cash. I buy the debt for pennies on the dollar. And then I squeeze. I restructure. I foreclose. I liquidate. I am the janitor of the financial world. I clean up the messes that optimism creates. It's a cold business. It requires a specific temperament. You have to be able to look at a family losing their business and see only the numbers on a spreadsheet. You have to detach. You have to be a ghost. Veronica? Veronica was the opposite. Veronica was all about being seen. We met 10 years ago at a gala. I was there because I had just acquired the hotel chain hosting the event. She was there because she was in PR. To this day, I still don't know what she actually did other than look spectacular in a backless dress and charm the wallets out of donors. She was beautiful, vibrant. She filled the room. And I, the quiet man who spent his life in the shadows of ledgers, was drawn to the light. It's a cliché, I know. The boring financier and the sparkling socialite. I thought she brought balance to my life. I thought she softened my edges. I was wrong. She wasn't softening me. She was sanding me down. Veronica didn't love me. She loved the access. She loved the black card. She loved the way the valet rushed to open the door of the Mercedes. She loved the address. The house. That damn house. 4400 Ridgewood Lane. It was a monster. 6,000 square feet of faux Tuscan architecture in a gated community where the HOA fees cost more than the average American mortgage. It had columns that didn't support anything. It had a wine grotto. It had a 4-car garage that she insisted we fill with cars we rarely drove. I hated it. I felt like an imposter walking through those echoing halls. I wanted a cabin. I wanted a workshop. I wanted simplicity. But Veronica needed the stage. She needed the backdrop for her Instagram stories and her ladies' luncheons. When the marriage started to disintegrate, it wasn't a slow fade. It was a demolition. I caught her, not in bed with another man. That would have been too honest. I caught her funneling money. I noticed withdrawals from our joint investment accounts. Small at first, then larger. Consulting fees for her PR firm that had no clients. Charitable donations to foundations that didn't exist. When I confronted her, she didn't apologize. She attacked. "You control everything," she screamed, throwing a crystal vase at my head. "You treat me like an employee. I have to ask permission to buy a dress. I earned this lifestyle. I put up with your boring, miserable silence for 10 years. The divorce was nuclear. She hired the nastiest shark in the city, a guy named Gold who wore suspenders and smelled of sulfur. They went after everything. They accused me of hiding assets. I wasn't. They accused me of emotional abuse. I was just quiet. They tried to destroy my reputation with my investors. In the end, I made a calculation, a business decision. I wanted out. I wanted peace. And I knew the only way to get her to sign the papers was to give her the one thing she valued more than my money, the status. So I offered her the house. The equity in the house was about $1.2 million. The market value was $4 million, but it carried a massive $2.8 million mortgage. My offer was simple. She gets the house. She gets the furniture. She gets the Mercedes. In exchange, I keep my liquid cash, my stock portfolio, and my business. I walk away with the tools, my capital. She walks away with the trophy. There is a catch, of course. There always is. The mortgage was in my name. I couldn't stay on it forever. The decree stated she had 6 months to refinance the loan into her own name. If she couldn't refinance, the house had to be sold. I knew she couldn't refinance. She had no income. Her credit score was propped up by my authorized user cards. No bank in their right mind would lend her $2.8 million. But Veronica didn't understand finance. She only understood possession. She saw awarded 4400 Ridgewood Lane and stopped reading. She signed the papers with a flourish, thinking she had fleeced me. She thought she had won the kingdom. She didn't realize she had just inherited a liability that cost $22,000 a month just to keep the lights on and the mortgage paid. I moved into a small apartment downtown. I felt lighter, free, but per the agreement, I had 60 days to clear out my personal effect from the garage, my man cave. It was the only room in the mansion I actually liked. It was where I kept my tools, my project car, my sanity. Veronica, being Veronica, couldn't just let me leave. She had to twist the knife. The harassment started on day one of the 60-day grace period. She changed the gate code without telling me, leaving me sitting in the driveway for 40 minutes until I threatened to call the judge. She cut the power to the garage breaker, forcing me to bring in a generator just to run the lights. She accidentally left the sprinklers on while I was moving boxes, soaking my vintage car manuals. And then she moved him in. Kyle was a life coach. He was 25 years younger than me, had hair that defied gravity, and wore tank tops to dinner. He was everything I wasn't. Loud, expressive, and broke. Veronica paraded him around the property like a prize poodle. I would be in the garage, working on the Chevelle, trying to ignore the world, and I'd hear them on the patio. "Babe, this wine is amazing," Kyle would say, loud enough for me to hear through the walls. "We should build a yoga studio in the garage once the old grump is gone. The energy in there is so stagnant." "Oh, absolutely," Veronica would reply, her laugh tinkling like broken glass. "We'll sage the whole place. Get rid of that toxic masculinity smell." They were drinking my wine. They were sitting on my patio furniture. They were planning to renovate my workshop with money they didn't have. I kept my head down. I kept wrenching. I told myself, just 60 days. Then you're gone. Let them have it. But then the letter came. It wasn't sent to the house. It was sent to my office. It was a standard notification from First National Bank. Because my name was still on the mortgage, I got the alerts. Notice of delinquency. Payment due, $14,500. Days past due, 30. I frowned. I checked the date. It was the first month after the divorce was final. She hadn't paid the mortgage. I assumed it was a clerical error. Maybe she was switching accounts. Maybe she forgot. I didn't say anything. I wasn't her accountant anymore. Month 2 passed. Another letter. Days past due, 60. Month 3. Days past due, 90. Notice of intent to accelerate. I sat in my office, staring at the paper. She wasn't paying. She was taking the alimony check I sent her, $10,000 a month, and blowing it. I check her social media. I know, don't look. She was in Cabo. She was buying new drapes. She was hosting a rebirthing party for herself. She was living like a queen in a house she was actively stealing. She assumed I would pay it. She assumed that because my name was on the loan, I would never let it go into foreclosure because it would damage my credit. She thought she had me in a leverage trap. Pay my mortgage, Damon, or watch your precious credit score burn. She was betting on my fear. She forgot that fear is not an emotion I possess when it comes to money. I don't feel fear. I feel opportunity. I picked up the phone and called my contact at First National. His name was Bill. We had done $50 million in deals together over the years. Bill, I said, the Vance loan on Ridgewood. It's hitting the 90-day bucket. Yeah, Damon, Bill sighed. I saw that. I didn't want to call you. It's awkward. We're going to have to start proceedings soon. Is everything okay? Everything is fine, Bill. In fact, it's perfect. What do you mean? I don't want to pay the arrears, I said. I want to buy the paper. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. You want to buy your own mortgage note? Bill asked. Damon, you can just pay it off. You have the cash. No, I said. If I pay it off, I just own the debt, and she still owns the house. If I buy the note as a third-party entity, I become the bank. And if I become the bank, I control the foreclosure. I could hear Bill smiling through the phone. You're a cold son of a bitch, Damon. I'm a distressed asset manager, Bill. And I've just spotted a very distressed asset. That was the moment the game changed. That was the moment I stopped being the victim and started being the predator. I set up the LLC the next day. Omega Servicing. A faceless, nameless corporate entity. I funded it with cash from my holding company. I waited. I let her miss month 4. Month 5. Month 6. I let her dig the hole so deep she could see China. And all the while, I kept working in the garage, listening to Kyle talk about his chakras and listening to Veronica talk about how she was the queen of Ridgewood. She had no idea that the ground beneath her feet had already been sold. Buying a mortgage note isn't like buying a car. You don't walk into a dealership and point. It's a shadow transaction. It happens in the back rooms of compliance departments, buried in spreadsheets that look like the matrix code to the uninitiated. I formed Omega Servicing, LLC in Delaware. It cost me $300 and 20 minutes of paperwork. It was a ghost entity. No employees, no office, just a P.O. box in a strip mall 3 towns over and a bank account I funded with cash from my private holding company. I called Bill back 2 days later. I'm ready, I said. Send over the purchase agreement for the Vance note. You're sure about this, Damon? Bill asked, his voice low. If you buy this, you step into the shoes of the bank. You become the bad guy. You have to handle the collections, the notices, the legal posting. First National washes its hands of it. That's the point, Bill, I replied, staring at the ceiling of my garage. I don't want First National handling my ex-wife. You guys are too nice. You send letters. You offer workout plans. You give grace periods. I paused. I don't believe in grace periods for people who steal. The deal was done in 48 hours. First National was happy to get the toxic asset off their books because the loan was non-performing, meaning no payments had been made in over 90 days, and because the property value was high but the market was softening, they sold it to me at a discount. I bought my own $2.8 million mortgage for $1.9 million. I wired the money. The wire confirmation popped up on my laptop screen. Funds transferred. Omega Servicing, LLC. I sat back in my chair. The garage was quiet. The air compressor hummed in the corner. Technically, I had just saved myself nearly $1 million in principal. But more importantly, I had just bought the legal right to destroy Veronica's life. Now, I own the paper. I own the debt. And in the state of California, the The lien holder has a lot more power than the squatter living in a master bedroom. I didn't tell her. Not yet. This is the strategic pivot. This is where the amateur gets impatient and runs into the house screaming, "I own you." No, you wait. You let the enemy get comfortable. You let them extend their supply lines until they are so far out in the open they have nowhere to hide. I watched. For the next 3 weeks, I was a ghost in my own driveway. I slept in the garage on a cot. I set up in the loft. I showered at my gym. I spent my days working on the Chevelle, sanding down the quarter panels, prepping for paint. Veronica thought she had one. She saw me living in the garage like a refugee and assumed I was broken. She thought I was hiding from her because I was ashamed of my failure. She became bold. She stopped closing the blinds. I could see her and Kyle in the kitchen, drinking my vintage Bordeaux, cooking elaborate meals. I saw the delivery trucks arriving. New furniture, new art, a Peloton bike that I knew neither of them would ever use. She was burning cash. My cash. The alimony checks were clearing on the 1st of the month, and by the 5th, she was broke again. Then I saw the invitation. I was taking out the trash, one of the few chores she still screamed at me to do, and I saw a heavy, cream-colored envelope in a recycling bin. It was gold embossed. Veronica's Independence Day, Gala, July 4th. A celebration of freedom and new beginnings. Live band. Catering by Chez Nous. Open bar. I picked it up. It was heavy stock. Probably $10 an invite. I did the math in my head. A party like this, for the crowd she ran with, 50 grand minimum, maybe 80. She didn't have 80 grand. I checked her credit cards, the one she thought I couldn't see because she had changed the passwords, but failed to change the recovery email, which was still mine. She had maxed out everything. She had taken cash advances. She had put deposits down on tents, a stage, a lighting rig. She was betting everything on this party. It was her coming out to society as the victorious divorcee who took the king for everything he had. She wanted to show the world that she was the winner, and I was the loser living in the garage. The date was set for Saturday. I looked at the calendar. Today was Tuesday. Perfect. I went back into the garage and opened my laptop. I logged into the Omega servicing portal. I drafted a document. Notice of trustee sale. In our state, foreclosure is non-judicial. That means I don't need a judge to sign off on it. I just need to follow the timeline. She was 120 days delinquent. The notice of default had been recorded silently by the bank months ago. The clock had run out. I printed the notice. Then I printed another document. Demand for immediate possession. I waited until Friday morning, the day before the party. The trucks started arriving at 7 a.m. Massive white box trucks from the catering company. A flatbed carrying a portable dance floor. A crew of guys setting up a massive white tent on the lawn, my lawn. Veronica was outside in a silk robe, directing traffic. She looked like a general commanding an army. She was pointing at the rose bushes, screaming at a poor landscaper because the hedges weren't symmetrical enough. Kyle was there, too, holding a mimosa, looking useless. I wiped my hands on a rag. I put on a clean shirt, a polo with my company logo, subtle, on the sleeve. I picked up the folder. I walked out of the garage. The gravel crunched under my boots. Veronica turned. When she saw me, her face twisted into a sneer. "What are you doing?" she snapped. "I told you to stay in the garage. You're ruining the aesthetic. The guests will be here tomorrow." "We need to talk, Veronica," I said, stopping at the edge of the driveway. "I don't have time for your pity party, Damon." She waved a hand dismissively. "Go back to your little hole. Unless you're here to move that ugly car of yours so the valet can use the driveway." "I'm not moving the car," I said, "and you're not having a party." The catering crew stopped working. A guy holding a stack of chairs looked between us. Veronica laughed. It was a sharp, barking sound. "Excuse me? This is my house. This is my party. You have zero say in what happens here." The judge said you own the title." I interrupted. "But the judge also said you have to pay the mortgage." I opened the folder. "You haven't paid First National in 6 months, Veronica. You're 180 days in the hole." She froze. Her eyes darted to the catering crew, then back to me. That's a lie. You pay it. It's your loan." "It was my loan," I corrected. "Until last week." I pulled out the assignment of deed of trust. First National sold the note. They sold it to a private equity firm called Omega Servicing. So, she spat. So what? I'll call them. I'll explain that my ex-husband is a deadbeat who refuses to support me. They'll understand. You can't call them, I said. Because I'm standing right here. I stepped closer. I'm Omega Servicing, Veronica. I bought the note. I own your debt. And as the majority lien holder on this property, I am exercising my right to secure the asset. I held up the notice of trustee sale. You are in default. The acceleration clause has been triggered. The entire balance, $2.8 million, is due immediately. Not monthly. All of it. Today. You can't do that, she shrieked. Her voice cracked. That's illegal. I have rights. I have a lawyer. Call him, I said. Call Gold. Put him on speaker. She fumbled for her phone. Her hand was shaking so bad, she almost dropped it. She dialed. Mr. Gold, Damon is here. He's saying crazy things. He says he bought the mortgage. He says he's foreclosing. She held the phone out. Who is this? Gold's voice rasped over the speaker. This is Damon Vance, I said, managing partner of Omega Servicing, LLC. We are the holder in due course of the first lien on 4400 Ridgewood Lane. Your client is in default. We have accelerated the note. There was a long silence on the line. Gold was a shark, but he was a smart shark. He knew what holder in due course meant. He knew what acceleration meant. Damon, Gold said, his tone shifting from aggressive to cautious. You bought the note? Personally, through an entity. Everything is recorded with the county. Check the portal. If you own the note, Gold said slowly, and she hasn't paid. She hasn't paid a dime, I confirmed. And she's currently spending approximately $80,000 on a party she can't afford, which constitutes waste of the collateral. I'm shutting it down. Damon, wait, Gold said. Let's negotiate. We can. There is no negotiation, I said. The sale date is set for 21 days from now. But as for possession, I'm taking it. I looked at the head caterer, a big guy named Marco. Who signed your contract? I asked him. Ms. Vance did, Marco said, looking nervous. Did she pay you? We got a deposit. Balance due today. She doesn't have the money, Marco, I said loud enough for the whole crew to hear. And this property is now under the control of the lender. If you set up that tent, you are trespassing on bank property. I will not pay you, and I will sue your company for damages to the lawn. Marco looked at Veronica. She looked like she was about to vomit. Pack it up, boys, Marco yelled. We're leaving. No, Veronica screamed. She grabbed Marco's arm. You can't leave. The guests are coming. I'll pay you. I promise. With what, Veronica? I asked quietly. Your credit cards are declined. Your bank account is empty. The party is over. She turned on me. She launched herself at me, her fingernails aiming for my face. You bastard. You ruined everything. You planned this. I caught her wrist. I didn't squeeze. I just held it. I didn't plan for you to stop paying your bills, I said. I just bought the consequences. That was when the sheriff arrived. It was the same deputy from Tuesday. He pulled up in the driveway, lights flashing, but no siren. He got out, adjusting his belt. He looked at the catering trucks, trying to back out. He looked at Veronica, who was sobbing hysterically. He looked at me. Problem, Mr. Vance? The deputy asked. No problem, deputy, I said, releasing Veronica's wrist. Just a dispute over the venue. But I believe the party has been canceled. Veronica ran to the deputy. Arrest him. He's stealing my house. He's lying. The deputy looked at me. I handed him the fresh paperwork. The notice of trustee sale. The certified copy of the note ownership. He read it. He nodded. Ma'am, the deputy said to Veronica, this looks legal. If he owns the mortgage and you haven't paid, he has the right to secure the property. But I live here, she wailed. Foreclosure is a process, ma'am, the deputy said. But if you're asking me to remove the owner of the debt from the premises he's inspecting, I can't do that. The caterers were gone. The driveway was empty except for the sheriff's cruiser and my Chevelle. Kyle had disappeared. I saw him sneaking out the back gate with his gym bag. He knew a sinking ship when he saw one. I looked at Veronica. She was standing in the middle of the lawn, surrounded by half-assembled tent poles. She looked small. You have 21 days, I said. That's the statutory minimum before the auction. I suggest you start packing. Where am I supposed to go? She whispered. I don't know, I said, turning back to the garage. But I'd suggest finding a place with lower rent. I hear the market is tough right now. I walked back into my garage. I hit the button. The heavy metal door rolled down, shutting out the sunlight, shutting out the sobbing, shutting out the world. I picked up a wrench. I had a transmission to finish. The 21 days between the notice of sale and the auction were the longest 3 weeks of Veronica's life. For me, they were just business days. I didn't leave the garage. I didn't need to. I had a refrigerator, a cot, and enough work on the Chevelle to keep me occupied. I became a fixture of the property, a silent mechanic haunting the driveway. Veronica tried everything. The denial phase lasted about 48 hours. She stayed inside with the blinds drawn, ignoring the half-assembled tent poles rotting on the lawn like the bones of a prehistoric beast. Then came the bargaining. She came to the garage door on day 4. She wasn't wearing the silk robe or the designer sunglasses. She was wearing sweatpants and an old t-shirt she had stolen from me years ago. Her eyes were puffy. Damon, she said through the screen door. Her voice was small. Can we talk? Like adults? I didn't look up from the carburetor I was rebuilding. I'm busy, Veronica. Talk to my servicer. You are the servicer, she screamed, hitting the mesh. Stop playing games. Look, I can get the money. I have a friend in finance. He's going to lend me the arrears. Just stop the auction. Please. It's embarrassing. It's not embarrassing, I said, finally looking at her. It's foreclosure. It happens to people who don't pay their bills every day. You're not special, Veronica. You're just a statistic. I'll give you the garage, she offered, desperate. I'll sign a deed for the guest house. You can live here rent-free. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. You're offering me rent-free living in a building I already own the debt on? That's not how leverage works. You have nothing to trade. I have the house. No, I corrected. You have the equity. Or you think you do. But here's the math you never bothered to learn. The debt is $2.8 million. The market value is maybe $3.5 million on a good day. But with the penalties, the legal fees, the default interest, your equity is evaporating by the hour. By the time the auction hits, you'll be underwater. She stared at me. She didn't understand. She thought equity was a magic word that meant she was rich. She didn't realize it was just the difference between what you have and what you owe. And she owed a lot. Get off my driveway, I said. I have a fuel line to flush. She left, sobbing. Day 14 brought the anger. Her lawyer, Gold, tried to file an emergency injunction to stop the sale. He argued that the shadow landlord maneuver was predatory lending. He argued that I had unclean hands because I was the ex-husband. It might have worked if Veronica had been able to pay his retainer. But Gold was a shark, and sharks don't swim for free. When her credit card declined for the 3rd time, he withdrew the motion. I got the notification from the court clerk while I was drinking my morning coffee. Motion denied. Counsel withdrawn. She was defenseless. The boyfriend, Kyle? He came back once, on day 17. He pulled up in a borrowed pickup truck. I watched him from the window. He didn't go to the front door to comfort her. He went to the pool house. He loaded up the expensive espresso machine, the sound system, and a few cases of wine. He was looting the ship before it sank. Veronica came out screaming. Kyle, what are you doing? Help me. I can't, babe. I heard him say, shoving a subwoofer into the truck bed. My chakra is really blocked here. The energy is too negative. I need space. He drove off, leaving a cloud of dust and a crying woman in the driveway. I didn't feel pity. I felt validation. I had told her 10 years ago that people like Kyle only stick around when the sun is shining. She called me a cynic. I call myself a meteorologist. I know when the rain is coming. Finally, day 21 arrived. The auction. It didn't happen in a marble boardroom. It happened on the concrete steps of the county courthouse, surrounded by cigarette butts and pigeon feathers. It's a grim scene. Professional investors, guys like me, stand around in windbreakers holding cashier's checks. They are vultures waiting for the carcass to drop. They know the address. They know the comps. They know exactly how much profit is in the bones. I was there, but I wasn't wearing a windbreaker. I was wearing my suit. Veronica showed up too. She looked manic. She was holding a cell phone, live streaming to her 3,000 followers. "This is abuse," she was shouting into the camera. "My ex-husband is trying to steal my home. I need a lawyer. Someone help me." The auctioneer, a tired county employee with a portable microphone, didn't care about her Instagram live. He checked his watch. "Trustee sale TS, $40.99. Property address, 4400 Ridgewood Lane. Opening bid is the lender's credit bid." This is the part Veronica didn't understand. Because I was the lender, because I was Omega's servicing, I didn't have to pay cash. I could bid the amount of debt I was owed. It's called a credit bid. It's money that only exists on paper, but it counts as real currency in a foreclosure. Omega's servicing bids $2,950,000, I said clearly. The other investors looked at me. They did the math. The debt was high. There wasn't enough meat on the bone for them to make a profit if they had to outbid me. They shook their heads and put their checks back in their pockets. Going once, the auctioneer droned. "Wait," Veronica screamed. I bid $3 million. The auctioneer looked at her. "Ma'am, do you have qualifying funds?" "A cashier's check for the deposit." I can transfer it," she lied. "I have in crypto." "Cashier's check only, ma'am. If you don't have funds, you can't bid." "This is rigged," she shrieked. She lunged toward the podium. A bailiff stepped in front of her, his hand on his taser. Going twice, the auctioneer continued, ignoring her. "Sold to Omega's servicing for credit bid." He slammed his gavel. It was over. In that second, the ownership of 4400 Ridgewood Lane transferred from Veronica Vance to Omega Servicing, LLC. I walked over to her. She was hyperventilating, the phone hanging limp in her hand. "You have 24 hours, I said. "Standard eviction protocol. If you're not out by noon tomorrow, the sheriff will remove you. And Veronica, don't take the appliances. They belong to the house, which belongs to me." I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. I had a lot of paperwork to file. The eviction was quiet. There were no screaming matches, no thrown vases, just the mechanical efficiency of the law. I arrived at 11:55 a.m. the next day. I brought 2 locksmiths and a moving crew I had hired, not to move her in, but to move her out. The sheriff was already there. It was the same deputy. We were practically old friends by now. "She's in the foyer," the deputy told me. "She's refusing to leave." I walked in. The house smelled of stale perfume and panic. Boxes were scattered everywhere, half-packed. Veronica was sitting on the grand staircase, clutching a photo album. When she saw me, she didn't scream. She looked exhausted. "You won," she whispered. "It wasn't a competition," I said. "It was a contract. You broke it." "I just wanted the house," she said, tears running down her face. "I just wanted people to look at me and see success." "You had success," I said. "You had a husband who supported you. You had a life. But that wasn't enough. You wanted the kingdom." I gestured to the door. "The kingdom is under new management." The sheriff stepped forward. "Ma'am, it's time." She stood up. She looked around the massive, echoing foyer one last time. The marble floor she loved so much. The chandelier she had picked out in Italy. She walked out the front door, carrying 2 trash bags of clothes and the photo album. She got into her Mercedes, which I knew was 2 payments behind, and drove away. I stood in the doorway and watched her go. Then I turned to the locksmith. "Change them," I said. "All of them." And recode the gate. I walked through the house. It was empty. The silence was heavy, but it wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. I walked into the kitchen. I opened the fridge. It was empty except for a bottle of champagne she had been saving for her Independence Day. I took it out. I popped the cork. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the empty room. I didn't drink to Veronica. I didn't drink to revenge. I walked out to the garage. My garage. I ran my hand along the fender of the Chevelle. It was cool to the touch. I had spent $1.9 million to buy back a house worth $3.5 million. I had wiped out her equity, her credit score, and her ego in a single stroke. I had my home back. I had my sanctuary back. And I had done it all without raising my voice. The vindication. People think financial dominance is about having the most money. They're wrong. It's about having the most control. Veronica thought ownership was a piece of paper she could wave at her friends. She thought the deed made her the queen. She forgot that the deed is just a receipt for the dirt. The real power lies in the debt. The person who holds the note holds the leash. I see her sometimes. She moved to a small condo on the other side of town. She's selling skincare products on Facebook now, posting about hustle culture and starting over. She still posts pictures of the house sometimes, old throwbacks, caption "Miss my palace." She misses the palace, but she never understood the cost of the bricks. I'm still here. I finished the Chevelle. I painted it midnight blue. Sometimes when the neighbors ask what happened, where the loud parties went, where the life coach went, I just smile and tell them the truth. The landlord came home. There are two kinds of people in this world: the ones who want to look rich and the ones who want to be solvent. Never confuse the two, and never, ever try to evict the man who knows how to read the fine print. You might find out that he owns the ground you're standing on.